God bless you and good evening, Florida East Coast Baptist Association. It is my honor and pleasure to be here to your great moderator Toby Philpart, and to his wonderful cabinet. I want to just bless God and say thank you for thinking enough of me to allow me to be your preacher on this week. Well, let's get right to it. If you have your Bibles, and I hope you do, come with me to the book of Judges chapter 7, and we want to look at verses 15 through 22. Judges chapter 7, verses 15 through 22. I'm reading from the Living Bible translation, and starting with the 15th verse of the 7th chapter of the book of Judges, and concluding with verse 22. Starting with the 15th verse, the word of the Lord says, "When Gideon heard the dream and the interpretation, all he could do was just stand there worshiping God. Then he returned to his men and shouted, 'Get up, for the Lord is going to use you to conquer all the vast armies of Midian.' He divided the 300 men into 3 groups and gave each man a trumpet, a clay jar with a torch in it. Then he explained his plan. When we arrive at the outer guard post of the camp, he told them, 'Do just as I do. As soon as I and the men in my group blow our trumpets, you blow yours on all sides of the camp and shout, "We fight for God and for Gideon." It was just after midnight and the change of guards when Gideon and the 100 men with him crept to the outer edge of the camp of Midian. Suddenly they blew their trumpets and broke their clay jars so that their torches blazed into the night. Then the other 200 of his men did the same, blowing their trumpets in their right hands and holding the flaming torches in their left hands, all shouting, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.' Then they just stood and watched as the whole vast army began rushing around in a panic, shouting and running away. For in the confusion, the Lord caused the enemy troops to begin fighting and killing each other from one end of the camp to the other. And they fled into the night to places as far as Beth Shittah near Zerah, and to the border of Abel Meholah near Tabbath." You can take your seats. I want to thank you so very much tonight. I just want to look at this text, and I want to talk to you from this thought: get out the way. Get out the way. Faith in the protection of God. My brothers and sisters, if you live long enough, you will discover that in this life there are some battles that you must fight. It doesn't matter, y'all, how holy you are or how much you pay in tithes and offerings. There are some fights in this life that are just unavoidable. And if you haven't already found it out on your own, you will soon discover that being saved almost guarantees you that you will have some enemies who want nothing more than to see you discouraged, defeated, and destroyed. However, I came to give you some good news tonight, that though life comes with some unavoidable fights, not every fight is meant for you to have to battle by yourself. As a matter of fact, y'all, there are some fights that you just don't have to fight, because the Lord will fight them for you. However, you have to learn how to get out of the way and allow the Lord to fight your battles. Our text, y'all, that's before us tonight is tailored to teach us how to get out of the way, so that God can fight our battles. It's here with Gideon that we learn with his 300 men that God can and will fight our battles. Catch this, if we just get out the way. Look at it. In order to get out of the way and let God fight your battles, Gideon shows us first that you must be confident in the outcome. Let somebody shout, confident in the outcome. Okay, here it is in verse 15. The text says that when Gideon heard the dream and the interpretation, all he could do was just stand there and worship God. Well, in case you missed it, y'all, Gideon is on a nighttime field trip. Yeah, he got here because he was having a sleepless night before the next day's battle. And God told Gideon, come on, boy, since you ain't sleeping, let me take you somewhere so you don't have to worry about the fight tomorrow. God said, I understand why you can't sleep, because worry has you. And so God takes him, there it is, down to the enemy's camp so that Gideon could hear what the enemies were saying about him. Please don't miss this. When they got there, one soldier was talking to another soldier, and he said, I had a dream the other night that a round barley piece of bread rolled into the camp and crushed our tents and wrecked the joint. The other soldier told him, I know the interpretation, that was nobody but the sword of Gideon. Why? Because God has given him the victory. Well, it's right there that Gideon stands up and starts giving God some praise. That brings me to my first, that there is worship before warfare. Here it is. There's nothing new about worshiping God before going into battle. Here it is. Often kings called for the priests before they went, so the priests could ask God whether they would be victorious or not in the battle. We see it in 1 Samuel chapter 30, verses 7 and 8, when David calls Abiathar the priest to come and inquire about going after the enemy that has invaded and took their families. David needed to know, does God want me to pursue? There are other times that leaders come before the Lord, and they come so that the Lord can pray, so that they can pray to the Lord for victory before the fight. However, if you look at this text carefully, Gideon is not seeking God's advice or asking God to give them victory. Instead, y'all, Gideon is worshiping God and giving him praise and thanksgiving. Here it is, for the victory that is yet to come. You missed your shout. I'll come and get you. Gideon is not praying for the Lord's help, but he is praising the Lord for the victory. Well, in case you missed it, Gideon is praising God for his promised victory that his enemy has already confirmed. If you back up just a few verses, you'll discover that God had already told Gideon when he cut his troops down from 32,000 to 300 that he was going to give him the victory. And with 300 men, here it is, God said, I will deliver the Midianites into your hand. But when Gideon heard it from his enemies, talking about the dream, the enemy didn't say in the present tense the interpretation. interpretation of the dream, which would be that God will give us Gideon's, put us into Gideon's hand. But when the enemy spoke, he spoke in past tense, and he said, for God had already given us into Gideon's hand. You miss your shout. He spoke not of present stuff, but of stuff that's already done. He spoke as if it was already finished. War fought, victory won. He doesn't wait for the battle to be over, y'all, before he gives God praise, but he gives God thanks before it ever got started. Here it is. He gives God thanks and thanksgiving now. Here it is, because he's got a promise in his pocket that God has already promised him the victory. No, when God promises you the victory, you don't have to pray for it. You don't have to ask God, should I go? Will I win? When God says it's yours, you've got a yes in your pocket. And when God gives you his word, you can go ahead and give God glory for the promises that he's already given. Here it is. When Gideon gets back to the camp, he tells his men, get up, for the Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands. Here it is. He doesn't need another sign nor another person, because he's got a promise from God that he's already won. Let me come and get you. The other year in 2019, the billionaire Robert Smith was the commencement speaker for Morehouse graduation. That was in 2019. And as the commencement speaker, Robert Smith stated that he wanted to gift the entire 2019 class. And so he stated, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pay off every student's student loan. You missed it. You missed it. He promised every graduate that he was going to pay off their loans. And I'm watching the commencement. And when he said it, folks started jumping up shouting. I was looking at the graduates shout. But I discovered that by degrees there was greater shouting. Can I come and get you? Those who were just getting their bachelor's degree, they jumped up and waved and shouted. But then I looked over and saw those who were graduating with their masters. They jumped a little higher, shouted a little louder. But when I looked at those with the doctoral stripes on their robes who were graduating with their doctorate, they shouted and did the huckabuck. Why? Because at each level there's different debt, and the ones who made it to the PhD understood that they had more debt that was being paid for. Well, here's my shout. Not one of them waited for it to be paid. Please don't miss this. Nobody in the crowd said, wait, I ain't seen no check. I haven't heard from my student loan people. No, I ain't gonna say nothing until I see. The reason why they could shout with no sign of a check is because of who it was that said he was paying the bill. In case you missed it, he's a billionaire, and that means he has the ability to keep his promise. And so when someone promises you who has the ability and the intent, you don't have to wait for it to happen. You can shout, right? Okay, let me come and get you. Once God confirms that it's not your battle, but the battle belongs to him. You don't have to wait till it's over. You can start shouting right now. Why? Because he has the ability. In case you missed it, he is still the undefeated, undisputed heavyweight champion of the universe. He's never lost a fight. And when God says, I've got to fight, you don't have to wait till it's over. You can shout right now. I dare you to touch your neighbor, text your neighbor, and tell your neighbor, don't wait for the battle to be over, baby. Go ahead and shout right now. Okay, let me come and get you, because some of you still missed it. Some of y'all ain't shouted yet. Because you haven't put the promise up against the problem. The doctor said it's cancer. But God promises say that by his stripes you are healed. You don't have to wait for what the doctor got. You can start shouting right then. Why? Because I know a physician that's never lost a patient. Let me push. In order to get out of the way, not only must you be confident in the outcome, but if you want God to fight your battle, then, y'all, you must also be comfortable, here it is, with the unconventional. Text somebody, say, be comfortable with the unconventional. Here it is. After getting his 300 men up, Gideon now moves to get them armed. In verse 16b, the text says that Gideon gave each man a trumpet and a clay jar with a torch in it. Please don't miss that. No, don't miss that. He gave each man a trumpet, a clay jar, and a torch. Strange weapons. Tell your neighbor, strange weapons. Instead of handing out swords and shields and bows and arrows, Gideon has given the men trumpets and torches in clay jars. They are already, y'all, outnumbered 135,000 to 300. And now they have no conventional weapons in which to go to battle with. Please don't miss this. All they can carry is a trumpet in one hand and a clay jar with a torch in the other. That means that they're going to have to leave sword and shield back home, bows and arrows back home, and they're going to have to trust what Gideon is giving them. I want to pause parenthetically and give Gideon's men credit for having enough faith in their leader to follow where he leads, even when they can't see it. These men, y'all, were not torch bearers nor trumpet blowers. They were soldiers skilled in sword fighting and arrow shooting, but they were willing to leave behind what they were comfortable with and take what they had never used before. And catch this, not one of them decided to say, hold on, Pastor Gideon, I got to call an unreadiness. Not one of them said, wait, we're going to have to vote on this because we ain't never used this before. But they took Gideon at his, I got to give him some praise because even though they couldn't see it, they went along with it. Why? Because Gideon, we're going to trust you as you trust God. If you're, here it is, if you're going to get out of the way and let God fight your battles, then you can't fight the enemy with what the enemy is using. Please don't miss this, saints. If the enemy is using hate, then we must meet it with love. If they use fear, then we must meet it with faith. And if they despitefully use us, then we must continue to pray for them. And if they violently slap us, then we must be nonviolent and turn the other cheek. And I hear you saying all the way at home, oh no, preacher, you got the wrong person. I be doggone. I be Jim Brown Kelly if I'm going to let somebody do something to me and not get back. I want an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But if you're going to win, then you must get out of the way and trust God with his unconventional methods. That's why in verse 17a, Gideon said to his men, watch me and follow my lead. Watch this, for there is meaning in what appears to be madness. Here it is, between 10:30 and midnight. Gideon and his men surround the valley in which the Midianites were camped. And after telling his men to do what I do, Gideon blew his trumpet, smashed his clay jar, revealing the torch, and shouted. Please don't miss this. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians 10:4, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. Here it is. Look at it. A blast of the trumpet, a shine of the torch, and a shout for the battle. That's all they got. That's all they got. A blast from the trumpet, a shine from the torch, and a shout for the battle. Look at it, a blast from the trumpet. In those days, you should know that only the commander of the battalion, y'all, had a horn to blow. And he blew that horn to signal the army to attack. Please don't miss this. Only the commander had a horn. And the commander would blow the horn for his battalion to attack. Only one horn. And the battalion had weapons. Each battalion had a leader with a horn to signal the attack. So however many horns you heard would give you an idea of how many battalions there were that were getting ready to charge for the attack. You miss your shout, I'm gonna come and get you. Gideon has only 300 men to go up against 135,000 Midianite soldiers. But each man has a horn that they are blowing. So when the enemy hears the horns being blown by 300 men, the enemies believe that there are at least 300 battalions. And the enemies are thinking that we've been outnumbered by Israel. Let me come and get you. Only one person in a battalion would have a horn, and then the rest of the battalion would have weapons, and only one horn would blow for the battalion to attack. But since everybody on Gideon's side got a horn, what the enemies heard is 300 battalions on their way in. They're already winning, and they ain't even started. But not only is there the blowing of the trumpet, but y'all, then there is the shining of the light. When Gideon breaks his clay jar, he lifts up his torch up high, and all 300 men do the same, holding their lights up high. The enemy army is seeing lights appear all all around them. Please don't miss the symbolism. They are at war with the enemy who has come to steal, kill, and destroy what Israel has. But instead of fighting back against the enemy, these 300 Israelite soldiers are letting their light so shine. I want to pause parenthetically and say, here's how you win when folk are attacking you. Jesus says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Let me come and get you. When they hate on you, let love shine. When they cuss at you, let love shine. And when they mistreat you, let love shine. Why? Because love will have the final word. Not only do we have the blast of the trumpet, the light of the torch, but then there's the shout for the Lord. In verse 20, the text said that they all shouted the sword of Gideon, and the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. They shouted so the enemy would know that it was the Lord who was giving Gideon the victory. Please don't miss this. The reason, y'all, they gave the Lord a shout out was because they knew that God's reputation preceded him, and that the Midianites had already heard of all of the armies God had defeated for Israel. The shout of the Lord, y'all, serves two purposes. At first, it tells the enemy who it is that they're really fighting against. And second, it reminds us that we serve a God who fights our battles and gives us victory. Every now and then, you ought to shout his name. Because things happen when you shout his name. When times get hard and it looks like you're outmanned and outgunned, you ought to shout his name. For the Bible declares that demons tremble at his name. Sickness leaves at his name. And every now and then, when things get bad, you ought to just shout his name. Jesus. That's it. Because that name can bring down fortified walls. That name can comfort breaking hearts. You ought to shout his name. I got to go. In order to get out of the way, let God fight your battles. Not only must you be confident in the outcome, comfortable with the unconventional, but here it is finally, if you're going to let God fight your battles, then you must be content with just observing. Tell somebody, be content with just watching. If you study the text, you'll notice that it's not quite in chronological order, for actually verse 22 happens before verse 21. In verse 22, the text says that when the 300 blew the trumpets, God aimed each Midianite sword against his companion all over the camp, and they ran for their lives. Please don't miss this. After Gideon and his men blew the trumpet, broke their jaws, and held up their torch and shouted for the Lord, the text says that then God moved. You missed it. After they blew their trumpet, held up their torches, shouted for the Lord, then God moved and caused the enemy to kill one another. Once God started moving, in verse 21, it said, then they stood and watched as the whole vast enemy army began rushing around in a panic, shouting and running away. When God steps in, you've got to have enough sense, y'all, to step back and stand still and let him fight your battle. I'm about out of here. But the prophet Jehaziel told King Jehoshaphat and all of Judah that the Lord said over in 2 Chronicles 20 and 17, you do not have to fight this battle. Position yourselves. Stand still still and see the salvation of the Lord. He is with you, Judah and Jerusalem. Don't be afraid nor discouraged. Tomorrow, go out to face him, for Yahweh is with you. And that's all you need. He said, y'all hold your peace. I'm on my way there. All you got to do is stand still and let me fight. That's what he told Moses when him and the children were hemmed in. They had two unclimbable cliffs on both sides of them. They had an uncrossable sea in front of them and an unconquerable army behind them. But it was then that Moses cried out, and the Lord told him, fear not, and stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you shall see them again no more and forever. I like and forever. He means take a good look, because that's the last you will see of the Egyptians. If you take your hands off and stand still, God will fight your battle. That's all I got. Thank you, Florida East Coast. But I got one thing to tell you. The fight ain't your fight. Stand still, get out the way, and let God fight your battle. The hymn writer put it this way when he said, beings of heaven, as I go through this wilderness below, guide my feet in peaceful ways, turn my midnights into days, when in the darkness I would grope. Faith always sees a star of hope, and soon from all life's griefs and dangers I shall be free. Someday he got to the chorus and he said, I do not know how long it will be on what the future holds for me, but this I know, if Jesus leads me, I shall get home someday. I gotta quit, but I'd be remiss if I didn't give you my father's favorite verse. It's in verse 3 where it says, harder yet may be the fight, right may often yield to might, wickedness a while may reign, Satan's cause may seem to gain, but there is a God. That's where I want to park. No matter how it looks, I thought I'd remind you, but there is a God that rules above with a hand of power and a heart of love. And if I'm right, he'll fight my battles. I shall have peace someday. I dare you to touch your neighbor and tell your neighbor, get out the way and let the Lord fight your battles. Neighbor, get out the way and go ahead and give him glory, because the battle is not yours, it belongs to the Lord. Listen, God says, take your hands off. Trust me. Got to have enough faith that I'll protect you no matter who you're against. God say, I got it. Stand still. Get out the way. And watch him fight your battles. God bless you. God keep you. Florida East Coast. God bless.